I'm Landry Jones, Conservation Grazing Specialist with MFA Incorporated. Today I'm out here on my 80-acre farm where I've got 20 acres of native warm season grass established. And I thought I'd just show you all a short video on how I manage my natives, kind of what I look for. This is the third year of growing that we've had on these natives. We established them about 3 years ago. Last year utilized them for about 30 to 45 days, just kind of lightly utilized them as they were still getting established to some degree. But this third year, we're going to use them. We're going to use them like they're made to. We're going to push them. We're going to see what these native warm season grasses are made of and see how these cattle respond on them. So stick with me today as I show you how to manage native warm season grasses with grazing. All right, so we're out here in this first paddock. This field is a 20-acre native warm season grass field that I established 3 years ago. I installed a grazing system. I've got a permanent electric hot wire fence that divides this 20-acre field in two. So I got two 10-acre permanently divided pastures. And what that allows me to do is divide that up even further. I've got a water tank in the center of this 20-acre field, splitting those two 10-acre fields, and then I can take a temporary hot wire, a poly wire, and divide these 10-acre fields into two, so essentially giving me 4 or 5-acre fields. I've got, right now I've got 18 pairs that are out here on this native warm season grass. I turned into this first paddock, this northeast paddock, turned in Memorial Day, so May 30th. And this first paddock, they were in for about 4 to 5 days is what they had them in. It took them probably 12 to 24 hours before they kind of get used to it. These cattle really haven't seen. I brought in some new cows this winter that probably haven't seen native grass before, so it took them just a little while to kind of get accustomed to it, obviously, to walk around and see what was going on, find out where their water was and all that good stuff. But it did take them a little while to get used to it, but they were in here for about 4 to 5 days. Again, 18 pairs. Try to turn them in when it gets about belly tall on them. So, you know, we're talking 20 to 24 inches. And so they moved out of this. Probably about May 4th, I believe it was, or excuse me, June 4th. Moved out of this field June 4th, and you can see the regrowth. So try to pull them out when it gets about boot tall. You know, in that 10 to 12 inch range is kind of when we're looking at moving these cattle out, and had some pretty good regrowth. You can still see, obviously, some plants that have been nipped on, but there's a lot of it that's growing out of it. And so this is the first field. Really happy with the way that they're grazing. I'll probably say that again in this video, but really happy with the uniform grazing I'm getting out of here. That 4 to 5 days seems to be kind of the sweet spot for the number of head I've got on here. Now I could take this grass down a little bit lower. They're not taking it quite to 10 or 12 inches, and I'll show you the field that they moved out of just last night. But you know, it's kind of like trying to catch up with that spring growth on cool season grasses, mainly just kind of flash grazing, just running through, nipping it off, and moving on. Hopefully, and we've been kind of cool and wet this spring. So these native grasses, they really like hot, dry weather. That's when they thrive. And so they've come on all right, but I think we're going to start getting into the 90s next week, not calling for rain for about 7 days or so. That's when these grasses really start to shine. And so probably could leave them on a little bit longer once those grasses really kick into gear. But this first field, really happy with the way that it looks. And so let's move on to the second paddock that they were in, and we'll take a look at kind of where it's sitting. All right, so we're in the second paddock. This would be the northwest paddock. This is about 5 acres worth as well. I've got it subdivided. Like I said, it's subdivided with some poly wire there. And then you can see the water tank behind me. Again, it's been about 7 days or so. 6 days, I guess, maybe, since the cattle have been in this field. Again, you know, probably trying to remove these cows when that grass gets, well, you can see this plant here. You know, it's about 16, 17 inches tall now, but you can kind of tell where it was bit off at about 12 inches, 13 inches. Obviously, some of them aren't the same there. That one's showing, 22, 24 inches. But for the most part, pretty uniform. There is obviously some ragweed and stuff in here. I'll show you on the other field. They're eating that ragweed. They're eating some of this stuff. There is some bare ground. That's what I'm looking for. These native grasses, some good forage for the cattle. Also some bare ground for quail, nesting birds, and things of that sort. But really pretty uniform grazing heights. And this field is rebounded very well. Left them in here for about 4 days as well. But again, you can kind of see the grazing heights. That grass is really starting to jump here. When we get into full swing here, and we start getting hot and dry and into those summer months, it's not uncommon for this grass to grow, an inch a day. So, I've got 4 or 5 acre paddocks here, like I said earlier, and probably be back to that first paddock in about 16 to 18 days from when it was first grazed, or the last day that it was grazed. So right now we're probably looking at that 16 to 18 day rotation back to that first field that they were on. Probably going to be a little bit longer when we start really getting into the hot, dry years or hot, dry months of summer, and these grasses really start to take off. So let's go move to the third field. Like I said, they were just moved out of there last night, and we'll see kind of what those grazing heights. That's what I'm looking for when I'm looking at actually moving the cattle on that day. So let's take a look at that. All right, before we move on to that third paddock, I thought I'd stop here and show you my watering system. So I had a grazing system installed. We had this farm for 3 years now, I believe, and utilized some cost share. We was really fortunate to here in Missouri to have Missouri Department of Natural Resources, Soil and Water Conservation District. They've got some good livestock production cost share programs to help with rotational grazing, installing fence, setting up watering systems, wells, things of that nature. And so was fortunate enough to use my local county's Soil and Water Conservation District funds, cost share funds, to help with this grazing system. NRCS, USDA, Missouri Department of Conservation, all them state and federal agencies have some cost share available if folks are looking at helping out with grazing and or, installing some native warm season grasses or splitting up their farm and then trying to get you more utilization with rotational grazing or whatever it might be. I would highly encourage you all to stop by their local office and talk to them about what may be available for you. But that's what I used out here. And so this 20 acre field, like I mentioned earlier, is split down the middle with polywire. I have a well up on the east side of the farm, had water tank with a hydrant, water line with a hydrant run out here to the west side of the farm where the native grass is, and then installed this above ground tank. As you can see, it's a pretty large tank. I believe it's probably pushing 1,500 gallons, maybe not quite that, but pretty close. And reason I did that is that these cows they're done calving. I'm not out here checking these cows every day like I was during calving season, and so I don't need to be out here. They're pretty self-sufficient on their own. As long as they got grass in front of them and some water, they're pretty happy. And so this large tank allowed me to have the capacity that if for some reason my well went down, lost electricity, pipeline burst, the hydrant went out, the hose to the tank went out, something happened while I was not here, I had some backup supply of water. Obviously in the summer months, we want to make sure these cows got plenty of water to drink. And so if I'm not out here every day, if it's every 2 days or so, I feel comfortable there'd be a sufficient amount of water here to last them until I came out here to check it and move them to another source of water or get this one repaired. So anyways, just kind of wanted to show you what I've got here. The last thing I wanted to mention is I put down some geotextile mat underneath this tank. So obviously you can see it's a pretty high traffic area, but where they're standing drinking this water, and obviously it's not, it's limited access to the tank here because I got a hot wire split down the middle of it, but you're still going to have several head drinking at one time out of this tank. And in real wet conditions, this can just be a mess. It'll just start to wash out. You've seen that before around water tanks. And so put down this felt mat, this geotextile mat, dug down about 10 inches, put the rock on top of the mat, and then set my tank. And so it hasn't moved, hadn't really moved. Obviously, just now starting to use it, but we've been pretty wet here this spring so far, and really happy with the way that this is working. So anyways, if y'all are thinking about maybe setting a tank, I would highly recommend, or a high traffic area, I would highly recommend looking into that geotextile matting. Man, it just really saves the rock. You don't have to add any more rock, and it keeps from washing out and just keeps those high traffic areas from just being a big mud hole. So, all right, let's move on to the third field. All right, so we're in the third field now. These cows just got moved out of here last night. They were in this field for about 4 days. The grass is a little bit thinner on the east side of this field, so I'm probably missing, I'd say an acre or acre and a half of grass. It just stays wet there. Didn't get established real well. There's some just traffic, driving traffic from getting field to field, and so about 3.5 to 4 days is what they were in this field. That first field is probably my biggest, so to speak, and I was in there for about 4 or 5. But just wanted to kind of show you what this looks like. So they just moved out of here last night. You can see, there is some ragweed in here, but again, they're nipping that ragweed off. That's been taken off. Obviously, that's been taken off. There's ragweed right now has got some good nutritional value to it. It won't be like that for too much longer, but they're grazing this pretty uniformly. I'm very happy with the way they're grazing it. Not too much overgrazing. There's going to be some there. You can see they took that plant down to 6 inches or so, 4 to 6 inches. But for the most part, I would say on average, that's 14 inches. Let's go. Here's one here. Grazed it down pretty short, and I am close to the water, so you're at 10 inches on that one. Here's another one, 14 inches. So you're in that 10 to 14 inch range. That 12 inch range is kind of what you're looking for. Very happy with the way that they're grazing this. I really wouldn't change much else. I was this is the first time that I've really pushed this field to see what it was made of with these native grasses, and the stalking rate, and so really pretty tickled with the way that it looks, and wouldn't ask for anything much different. So let's go over and take up the last field. They just got turned into this field last night, and so let's go take a look at that and kind of see the grazing height that I'm looking for to turn cattle into. All right, so we're here in the last paddock. This would be the southwest corner of this 20 acre native warm season grass field. Again, 5 acre paddock here, and just turned to these cows in last night, and just kind of wanted to show you, what this grass looks like. Like I said, trying to get to that 22 to 26 inch range, belly tall on them cows. You can see cow and calf, some calves over there feeding. That's hitting her right about at the belly, and so that's kind of where I'm at here. They've been in here about 24 hours now. You can see this grass here. That's pretty dang tall. You're pushing 29, 30 inches. If it gets too tall, it's like anything. It just gets kind of stemmy, a lot of lignin in it, and they move on to something a little bit more palatable. But here's a plant. You can see it's been eaten off there. It was eaten off about 22, but overall plant height's probably about 24, 26. Do have some bare ground, obviously. Nothing wrong with that. I don't mind a little bare ground. These grasses put out the tonnage with the bare ground. They don't need sod forming grass. That provides some bare ground for quail. Had some quail out here whistling last night. Wildlife to move around, so that's pretty beneficial to me. Got some ragweed. Obviously, the field we were at earlier, you can see they were eating that. They haven't really touched much of this. Once it gets kind of stemmy and mature like that, they kind of move on from it, which is fine. I don't mind the weeds in here. I actually overseeded this winter with some forbs and wildflowers, so I'm not worried about some ragweed. I'm not worried about the weeds in here. Just that doesn't bother me at all. But you can kind of see the heights here. This is what I'm looking for when I turned them in here last night, 22, 24 inches. Really happy with the way this is going so far. Like I said, first time I've kind of used this field full blown with these native grasses, and just really happy with the way it's going so far. The number of head I've got in here, again, about 18 pairs on this 20 acres, and hopefully it's going to last me, up to the 1st of September, maybe longer than that. We'll see. Try to get off these native grasses about 30 to 45 days prior to frost. Let them do their thing. Let them put their energy back into their root system, store those carbohydrates so they can overwinter well. If you push these grasses and graze them too tight, over time they'll reduce their root reserves and start to thin out, and that's when you see fescue start to creep back in. But for the most part, pretty happy with the way this is going. You can see behind me, those are my shade structures that I've got. This 20 acre field doesn't have a lot of shade in it. There's a little bit of shade on the west side with some shrubs, some plum thickets, but for some good quality shade with good airflow, don't have much here in these fields. And so had those shade structures made and put some shade cloth on them, and worked out really well for me so far. They're utilizing them obviously in the heat of the day. but do have some animals going out to graze. Really happy with the way this is going. Appreciate you all joining me on the video, and look forward to the next one. Thank you.